In the Declaration of Feminist Digital Justice that IT for Change worked on last year with 36 other feminist scholars and activists from across the world, and we released this at the CSW last year, where the question of digitalization and women's digital rights was discussed for the first ever time. The declaration actually approaches it this way. The affordances of networked intelligence must be harnessed for sustainable production and equitable distribution. Dominant platform firms that profit from gendered labor hierarchies in transnational value chains must make way for alternative platform models that transfer power to women led and women worker owned social and solidarity enterprises. My final point is this: we often tend to think of an oppositional dynamic between public infrastructure and the digital commons. And I would urge that we see this as complementary rather than oppositional, because if we have to have a sustainable pathway to pursue data as right to knowledge and look at a collective data rights approach, we need public platform infrastructural backing where the social knowledge of society is used for the democratization of value rather than fueling the capitalist pathway of technological development.
Yes, thank you, Nandini. I'd like to now go ahead and ask Emma to speak. We did hear about her work with the care work cooperatives, but I think specifically through a feminist lens, how might we articulate the problem and its solution?
I'd like to start by welcoming all of the men in the room. Thank you very much for being here. We have many vacancies. Men make fantastic care workers. There are 15% of care workers in the UK who are men because of the gender bias that women do caring roles, and women's work is care work. Not only is that gender bias reinforced by societal norms, it's also reinforced by the people receiving support themselves. White men, mostly in the UK, prefer to have a woman caring for them because that's what they've grown up with and that's what they know. Now, what we found at EqualCare is that we've managed to change that balance a little bit. So we have around 25% of our workers, and we'll be up to 80 workers in January, so as I said, still small, are men. And they have been attracted to the cooperative, not because, I don't know why they've been attracted to the co-op because we're working on changing the perceptions of care work, on what it means to do care, and the kind of respect that every single individual should be afforded who actually takes the time, takes the emotional strength to do that role. And so that recognition and that respect is a fundamental requisite of any of the platform co-ops we start, any of the cooperative work that we do, if we want to do anything that's remotely feminist. That's point number one. Now, that pride gets flipped on its head a lot in care. We all know it's a low-wage work, it's women's work, it's low status, it's disproportionately represented by women and ethnic minorities. So it's mostly young women, and then there's a gap, and then it's older women. And what we see is this kind of, for most of the people who have joined EqualCare, there is this kind of glorious and weird and wonderful transformation that takes place. So one of our care and support workers who joined us 3 years ago, she joined, her self-esteem was like here, absolutely on the floor. And this is very common, she didn't think that she could do anything. She didn't think that she had anything to bring. She didn't think that she could do anything outside of just giving care, which she thought was a valueless role. And these narratives, these stories are kind of playing in people's heads, kind of not just in the UK, but all around the world. And the more, going back to hats, the more kind of opportunities for different types of work and simply the kind of the culture and values that you can lean on just by being a co-op, we've seen her grow until now she's doing lead recruitment. So she's recruiting new care and support workers in, and she is just flowering, really. So the combination of being able to know that the work is respected, to be able to learn new skills, and to be able to do that in kind of a stealthy way. Like this is just part of the role, but oh, suddenly now I know how to do all of this stuff, is really key. And then on top of that, there's the flexibility of the work. So when people join us, they can choose to be employed or self-employed. That's fundamental. So you consent to your basis of employment. You make an informed decision as a care worker. I want to be employed or I want to be self-employed. An example of an independent care worker who joined us about 8 months ago, she has flexed her work up to a sort of something crazy, like around 50, 60 hours a week over the August period, because her husband wasn't working. So she thought, right, I'm going to go for it. She earned nearly £6,000 in the course of that period. And then she sort of started to drop down, and she's now on an average of 2,500 a month or thereabouts, because her husband's gone back to work. And she was able to just kind of make that change she didn't need to ask anyone. And then conversely, we have an employed member of staff who's gone through like a really, really horrible period. And to do that, she's completely changed the way her contract works. And she went back home and she sat with her partner and she was like, right, I want my working days to be this. And she came out, I was like, this is my new rota now. Yes, I've okayed it with the people I support. I've made some changes. I've agreed some other stuff with other members of the team. And she just did it. She didn't need to write to a manager to say, please, can I change my hours of work to accommodate my change in circumstances? So the key element, I guess, back to the feminist questions around feminism, is control. So if I have a choice about what my day brings, and I have a choice about what that work means, and I have a choice about even who I support, and the kind of work that I do with them in a collaborative way of working, then the respect, the self-esteem, the change that we need, particularly all of our young women, to be able to learn from an experience, then starts. So it's this kind of gorgeous combination of inputs and support that's really down to the amount of space that you give people to make those choices. Normal care, you don't give anyone any space. You say, go here, go there, go there, go there, go there. You can do this, you can't do that. There's no space. So you're infantilized as an individual, and there are lots of jobs that do that. Taxi drivers, working for Uber, for one. So I'll leave it there, but those are my initial musings. Thank you.
Okay, this works. Thank you for that. And I think the area of care work is particularly fraught because not only is the nature of work misunderstood and undervalued, but when combined with other issues that feminism talks about, such as intersectional identities and so on, it gets even more complicated. So I think in this case, the cooperative really does provide an approach that allows one to take control, which means that it is something of value to some extent, and just opens up new possibilities. So we then move on to Padmini, who is struggling with, yes, who will talk about ethics and decolonial approach to design. There it is.
All technology is working. Amazing. Right. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm going to be responding more specifically to the question that Usha posed, which is what specific examples could you bring to illuminate how you see a feminist approach to platform cooperatives? So what I'll be talking about is the work that we do at Design Beku. This is obviously not only specific to platform co-ops, but I'll talk a little bit about the logic behind why we founded Design Beku and how I see it embodying the certain feminist principles that we're hoping to see in platform co-op design. So as the slide says, all digital futures are designed futures, and I think the role that design plays in the creation of digital products and platforms are greatly underestimated. Design is seen as a very kind of cosmetic intervention rather than a systems and service intervention. And for us at Design Beku, we all, at some point or the other, taught at the Shrishti Institute for Art, Design and Technology. We all truly believed that our students deserved to understand more about designing for a range of communities, a range of people from intersectional backgrounds. And so what we try to do through our work is demonstrate how we can create contextually relevant, locally relevant, and ethical technological infrastructures. So as we all well know, digital infrastructures are completely devoid of an ethics of care. And so what we try to do is to envision and imagine with the communities that we work with what it means to put that ethics of care back into technology. Just to very quickly say that our work is inspired a lot by the Design Justice Network movement. So in case you don't know of their work, do look them up. They have a set of principles which talks about designing with communities rather than for. I think there's a tendency definitely in the design industry where designers are kind of helicoptered in as quote unquote experts for communities. And we feel like that couldn't be further from the truth, because communities are the experts in their challenges and that they face in their lives, and often think of the most ingenious and intelligent responses to those challenges, but might lack technological or digital or design resources to put those into play, and that's kind of where we come in. So one of our kind of core principles is what we call infrastructuring as meme. So that is actually in kind of direct opposition to or direct challenge to the notion of infrastructuring at scale. The way that we differentiate between the two is infrastructuring at scale, to our mind, basically is replicating exactly the same kind of technological or digital response to a wide range of situations and contexts, and we don't think that that works. So infrastructuring as meme is a more kind of modular response where we are looking at possibly repeating some kind of infrastructural elements, but it is definitely strongly modified and moderated by the context that that technology is unfolding in. Right. So, so some of our work is founded on this idea of a feminist server. This is not an idea that we came up with by ourselves at all. It's, oh no, yeah. So there have been thinkers, especially in Europe, feminist thinkers, who basically started thinking about what it meant for a server to be administrated in a collective, community-led feminist way. Any of you who have met a sysadmin or know a sysadmin or are a sysadmin know that it is a very male space. It is gate kept by a certain kind of amount of knowledge, and servers, I mean, run the world right now. The Amazon, somebody mentioned Amazon Web Services, Google servers. I mean, every single digital interaction that happens online happens on a gigantic server somewhere, wasting huge amounts of resources. So the idea of a feminist server is basically a server that is not kind of enthralled to the capitalist agenda. It's a server that can go down. It is a server that can be an act of infrastructure solidarity and necessarily a community project. And so by infrastructure solidarity, I would say that the work we do at Beku is an example of that, which is where we are helping communities to set up servers. This is just a very quick, there's a kind of manifesto of feminist servers. It's in the slides and you can take a look at it later. I'm not going to read it through all at once. But what I do really like about it is that it treats network technology as part of a social reality, which I think is quite in keeping with the cooperative principles. and is run for and by a community that cares enough for her in order to make her exist. So it's a situated technology that is run by a community that does not strive for seamlessness. It can run down, it can run dry, all of these things can happen, and it avoids efficiency. So I wouldn't say it adds friction, but it is not there to provide frictionless experience. What it is there to do is to network people in ways in which people are networked socially as well. So this is a glimpse from the Channapatna Health Library, which is a project that we've been running for the last 6 years in Channapatna, which is a small town in Karnataka. The women that you see there are 14 health navigators. They are frontline health workers. They're similar to ASHA workers, but they're paid by Maya Health, who is an NGO. And we've been working with these women for a very long time, and they told us that they think that the most valuable data and information that they hold is the conversations that they have with their patients. So basically, they go out into the field, they have patients that they check their blood sugar, their blood pressure, etc., and they collect all of this information and they put it on a server. And the server front end looks like this. This is Papar, which was built by Janastu. TB Dinesh is somewhere here and back there, and he runs Janastu. And they built this brilliant platform called Papar, which is an annotation platform. So the women basically upload these recordings of the patients that they've been speaking to. They are obviously anonymous accounts, and then they annotate it with information about the disease, about any kind of local remedies, if those can be used to counter this, and any other kind of contextual information that they can use to make this useful. And so we also have a kind of Wi-Fi mesh network that is set up locally, which means that the local community can actually access this conversation. And I'll just stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Padmini. I think we've had a nice trajectory of discussion here, and we'll end with the last intervention by Teepee, who will talk about youth collectives.
Good afternoon. Starting a youth cooperative 15 years ago is like a journey of constant discovery. Graduating from fine arts, we have like almost zero knowledge about starting a business. But we really love the idea of having a participative and democratic organization. That's why we have chosen to test the cooperative model. With like 10% resources and 90% trusting our guts. So we have discovered the strengths and weaknesses of the cooperative business model, and constant learning is what made our journey very enjoyable. Last year, I met Ella from the Department of Women and Development Studies of the University of the Philippines. So her study is about rediscovering social solidarity economy in women's livelihood practices in Philippine cultural and creative cooperatives. So her study is about analyzing the patterns of social solidarity economy in the Philippine creative cooperatives to aim for social change for women and gender diverse members, and to address their intersecting vulnerabilities. So her study shows that creative cooperatives are a fertile ground for social solidarity economy, feminist solidarity economy, and creative economy. So she says that our cooperative is just a few steps closer to actualizing the exclusive socioeconomic order. One of the strongest core value of the team is fostering innovation. So facilitating the platform cooperative course back in the pandemic allowed us to formulate platform-based business enterprises in the Philippines. So we have started around 4 business enterprises. And then the course also led us to make our own youth cooperative. So it's the Youth Connect Cooperative. And we used the methods, the tools, and actually made a video pitch for the ICA replication project, which won the grant. And then through the grant, we were able to accelerate the cooperative. And now we are able to conduct national and international events in the country. How did we overcome these challenges? It's because we creative cooperatives actualize alternative socioeconomic ecosystems to women and gender diverse artists. And we also have the core values. which gave a strong foundation to member retention. And then lastly, we have a law in the Philippines that allows to become a multipurpose cooperative, which made us expand and pivot our business, especially during the pandemic. So we were able to make a different business line because all the museums, our previous services were actually museum modernization. So all the museums were closed. So we were able to pivot our business without having to do so much paperwork because Red Root Artist Cooperative is a multi-purpose cooperative. And then recently, I met a student from the University of the Philippines. She's organizing a social cultural organization in the university, and she was able to make these different types of programs for students to become active members of the organization. So I learned about this word, sensing. It is developing programs through active listening, hearing, seeing, and receiving the verbal and nonverbal aspects of the message. So this is something that I thought would be a great idea to sustain active membership. So what I'm saying here is that there is a great advantage of having the youth in the cooperatives because they have the energy, they are curious, and they might be able to give the freshest ideas on some of the biggest problems of the society.
Thank you. So now that we've had some idea of the breadth of the panel and the different ways of approaching the notion of a feminist platform or a feminist collective, I'm wondering if we can push this a little bit further. One of the things that I noticed as a somewhat common thread was the idea of the ethics of care. Whether one thinks about the ethics of care as something that is built into the way we do things or something that is built into the way we deliver services. I think that is something that was common across the four presentations. And I'm wondering how, what specific dynamics of the platform ecosystem might be challenging to sustain an ethics of care. So I can see that when we have small projects with very identifiable or limited scope of activity, there's an attention to care in many ways. But does that mean we always restrict scope and scale, or is there a way to scale out that retains a focus on those ethics of care? So anyone?
Yeah. So I think I agree with you that it obviously seems much more achievable when it's at a much smaller scale, and it's something that we struggled with as well, because I think kind of inherent to whatever we do is also the wish to let it be sustainable, because often there are these interventions, they work very well for a while and then they fall by the wayside, and it's a waste of everybody's time and effort. And I think for us, even though we didn't do this consciously, it has kind of come to pass. And I'll just give you an example. So because the women that we work with, we've been working with them for a while, they have now kind of shown their own agency and desire in wanting to set up a producer company. And in doing so, they have been doing all their own research, etc. And we saw them use Paper, which was the software that I showed. We saw them using Paper for storing their research about the market producer company on that platform. And this is not something we had asked them to do. And again, like we see when we speak to them, that they have such brilliant ideas for future platforms or for future ways in which ICT can help them. And so for me, I think the ethics of care actually lies in being able to convey or pass on a certain way of thinking about technology that always has care at its center, right? So it becomes this kind of virtuous cycle. I'm not saying we put it into motion, but I think it's because we were modeling a certain kind of designing of technology that it's coming very naturally to them as they've been seeing us work.
Yes, you can only embed it in technology if you've already thought about it and embedded it into your organization and the way that you relate to people in real life. So yeah, a couple of things around that, like having much smaller groups, so smaller spaces that are built into the way that you meet. So that could be setting in space for one-to-ones. It could be kind of small group support. It could be anything that members want. Maybe we could apply it to the conference space, for example. So if there's space for us to support one another, which happens obviously in the interstices, it happens in the gaps. But if you create a space, create an intentional space to say, I have something that I want to give, and I also have something that I want to receive, then that's kind of one of the first steps, I think, to both creating those practices within our organizations, but then also as a group and also as a collective here.
I just wanted to add to this where, because we are like, it is related to Padmini's point also about thinking about feminist servers and thinking how do we feministize our infrastructure itself. And so, if you're looking at the platform economy, I think we all understand that it is an economy of intelligence, actually. And today, that intelligence, like Anita was also saying in the morning, she used the words cold and ruthless. And there's a cold, ruthless, calculative, exploitative, corporate logic of this intelligence. And I think the problem is that we know that AI has a certain scale logic to it because it comes out of like a stochastic process of probabilistic reasoning. And so it is that data and the computing power that make AI possible. But what we are doing with that benefit of like intelligence, that's actually the problem. And so I wanted to bring back something from the Feminist Digital Justice Declaration, where the group actually felt that instead of corporate intelligence, if we were looking at a networked scale, where the networked scale actually, to use an analogy from the natural world, it works like the mycorrhizal networks in the forests, where fungi and underground roots are talking to each other, and there is a communication where the entire ecosystem sustains itself. Why couldn't we imagine AI like that, where there is a particular federated intelligence? And that also brings me back to the point which we heard from Felix in the morning's presentation, that if can we communitize AI at some level, because to add to your point about in a context looking at like specific ethics of care and things like that, is it possible to just imagine AI where locally in contextually embedded communities, we are able to use our data for our benefit in a free and fair way rather than something else? So that's the model we need to be looking at, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting that I almost felt like, a predictive language model when you were speaking, because I knew you were going to say mycorrhizal. Anyway, I'm also wondering then, how does one move from these small-scale experiments or proofs of concept even to building larger solidarities in a platform economy that or a platform sociality, let's say, that that can become a model, right? So, I guess my question is, how does one go from here to building larger solidarities?
I think from the cultural context of the Philippines, we have like a very small gender gap. So we already have that nurturing culture. So that's why in the Philippines, there are more women CEOs in the cooperative movement because of that nurturing culture. So I think in general, if you have like the ethics of care embedded in your culture, that's when women will thrive. And at the same time, we are already in the level of having more gender diverse programs.
So actually going back to what Nandini was saying, I think a kind of ethical gesture is also curation, right? So when we're looking at data sets, I think, kind of an ethical data set is one that is curated, which is inclusive and gender diverse and so on and so forth, and representative. And I think speaking to what you're saying about how do we move towards larger solidarities, I feel like if we have a multiplicity of these kinds of data sets out there, then actually we can use AI for good, so to speak, and find those solidarities and then establish them in the real world, right? And kind of make those contacts. But I think at the moment, even what is being collected to be computed is very biased, right? So until that changes, I think it's going to be very hard at a platform level for us to find kind of ways to amplify solidarity.
I just have one follow-up question in this direction of not necessarily finding a universalizing logic that stems from feminism, but if we were to look at the cooperative principles that were laid out by Trevor earlier today, is there a way in which we might specifically interpret those through a feminist lens, or would there be something that you would want to add to those principles? Because, I mean, again, just to go further from what Teepee was saying, it's not only about women, right? I mean, feminism is about everybody. So are these principles fine? Do we need to think about them differently if we're looking at them through a feminist lens? It's not necessarily a provocation. It's just a curious question.
We have added one. Not the principles, actually, they're fine, but the values, which is mutual care. So, which is subtly different from mutual aid. So that's the value that we kind of subscribe to. And it's just the one thing for people to remember, so it's a little bit easier. And it feels like all of the other values and principles tend to flow from that. So it's like, again, kind of it's the ground on which we walk. Like if mutual care is alive and thriving in your organization, then the rest will follow. But you have to pay it the emotional toll, because it is emotional work. It's emotional labor. And I think recognizing that that is a form of labor, and it's often a form of labor that many of us shy away from and try and avoid. It hurts and it's difficult, and I don't want to have a difficult conversation in my day. I just want to do data entry or, something simple like a spreadsheet. But actually, the hardest work of these principles is that emotional work.
I was thinking that after today, maybe in the long term, there should also be something on feminist infrastructural choices.
Yes, that's a theme for the next conference. I wondered if there were questions from the audience for the panelists.
My name's John Dale, and I'm a sociologist at George Mason University from the United States. I think care, repair, and maintenance have a lot in common, and I think maybe one broader theme that comes out of what you all are saying too is that that is critical also to innovation, and our big tech platforms tend to render all of that kind of work invisible work and don't associate that with innovation. So that's one comment on that. Also, in terms of building solidarities, building larger solidarities or wider solidarities, I think there are two other themes that come out of this this session, but one we haven't talked too much about, and that's how platforms are embedded not only in social relations but also our ecology. So thinking about how we power, for instance, our AI or these other things that we want to run our platforms on matters. How we source those, and that's also a matter of care for all of us. How we take care of our environment, that is, the foundation of any kind of platform we want to run. Another one is has to do with our cities, and I'm thinking in particular the digital transformation of our public space. So where the first one, I guess the broader solidarity is around maybe an environmental movement, right? But the second one could also be around the right to the city. We are transforming this public space. It includes our digital commons more and more through smart city development that's taking place, and these platforms in part find their ecosystem in smart city development. But it also affects rural areas, right? These are connected. And so I guess that's maybe enough, except to say that this is also an issue of our democracy and one of the earlier themes we were discussing around our digital citizenship. So I think those are, I mean, maybe that speaks to these broader solidarities in the way that you're saying. And I think each of you are all speaking to pieces of it, but I just wanted to add those comments to it. So it's not really a question, it's an appreciation and comment. Thank you.
Can I just briefly say that India's smart city policy doesn't look at gender as a vector? So I think we have a lot of work to do there.
Yeah, so we'll maybe take a couple more questions and then address it back to the panel.
Hi, my name is Gwen Sa. I have an open question for speakers, whoever want to answer. And I appreciate you, moderator, saying that feminism is for everyone, not women or. I think I would like to shift focus a little bit, and if we put women, people or community at the center, not technology, I wonder if panelists or speakers have any example to show, if you notice, people coming together collectively rework how we see technology or even resist the need of putting technology at the center. Because my question is, if you have any examples that show any collective reworking, resistance, or even suggesting that what matters is not technology, but it is probably something else, right? Whatever you see. Thank you.
Okay, I'm Felix again. So this year I learned in particular, or specifically, that we all have female and male parts in us, and that it's actually important to bring them in balance for all of us, I guess. And I was wondering if this could be transferred to companies and co-ops in particular, and if co-ops, if they manage to, this is also from my own experience, they could also be a little bit dominated by male principles, but if they manage to embed this notion of care and other feminist principles, if they could become more attractive as workplaces, as companies and such, and what would be recommendations to do this?
Mine too is in the nature of a comment, and thank you very much for those wise words. I just wanted to add, and I mean, this is part of wordplay, but I do think that maybe qualitatively, the principle of co-implication and codependence, that may also be something to think about. I think not only nature and people, but also the non-human things that have become significant in the form of what we call artificial or synthetic intelligence in our ecosystems. I think once upon a time in many cultures, including in India, tools used to be worshipped because the carpenter felt that the tool was something that was not necessarily inanimate because they have power. The tool has power. So there are days dedicated during festivals when you actually worship tools. So in a certain sense, you recognize the power of something synthetic, something in your ecosystem to create chaos. And the way you could then perhaps harness that chaos for humanity was important. So to that extent, I think to make those things real, such as your experiment, so that through Papad, the server is not something that's an alien object, but a non-alienating, familiar and co-implicated ecosystem, I think is very important, because I think what is being provided to us as intelligence through our mobile phones, because computational power is so remote, is completely destroying our sense of how we relate to things, people, and nature.
Would any of you like to respond? I just wanted to say thank you for those comments. I think I completely agree that we should be thinking, obviously, at its core, again, a feminist way of thinking about the world is to consider all objects and relationships in their own right. So, I think those comments, both from Anita and from you, really resonated. But yes, comments from the panel.
I want to respond to Felix's, question slash comment. I think that in terms of member participation and creating truly inclusive spaces of participation, feminism has a lot of insight to offer, especially when we are speaking about cooperatives in the sphere of digital technologies and digital cooperatives. There's already a lot of work out there that actually shows that free and open does not necessarily equal an inclusive culture. This we have learned from Wikipedia, and there's this very famous study from actually about 10 years ago about how free and open often equals sexist, and it creates unfriendly environments. So maybe we go back even further to the feminist literature of the 70s, which actually shows that the tyranny of structurelessness that free and open actually results in is very exclusionary. And then we learn to put in new structures that are actually inclusive, learning from the very many feminist collective experiments that exist around the world.
Oh God, 4 comments and questions at once is it's making my brain explode a little bit. I sometimes think of our platform as an enabler of chaos, which is amazing. Partially to do with how slow we develop because we have one software engineer, but the being able to this is the advantage of developing slowly. A couple of examples of this: we have been building the calendar, the booking system, various features, kind of laying on top of that, blah blah blah. But in place of that. And as a kind of fallback to that, we have the chat. So initially, every single thing that got agreed and decided upon was just through a chat. And you can say anything in the chat. You can agree anything. You can exchange numbers. You can talk about anything you want. And so what I think of is actually going back to the male-female point, so where platforms are seeking greater and greater efficiency. So it might be, this person and this person took 10 minutes to agree a date to meet. That's really inefficient. We should build an app for that. And we should take out that conversation altogether. You're like, oh, if you listen to that conversation, they spent 40 seconds talking about the date to meet. And then the other 9 minutes and 20 seconds was connecting, talking about their experience, having a shared moment of support. So actually, those moments that platforms seek to try and make operationally efficient are also moments that have very unintended consequences to cut out and to reduce the opportunities for those relationships to build and develop. So it's a really kind of subtle thing. Just to the point at the back there, when our software engineer first started, he said, I was talking about all of the things that we're going to do and develop and how it's going to be amazing and this and that feature. And he was like, Emma, you have no idea how long people will put up with shit technology. and he was right. People don't care. They don't care. I mean, there's a surface moan, a lot of that, and irritation and frustration. But if you're getting the fundamentals right, if you are at a workplace where people respect you and listen to you, and where you know that your status is there as an owner, and then none of that really matters. It's annoying, but it doesn't kind of eat away at the core of your soul like a for-profit gig platform might do. Very different.
So I guess 4 words that I was thinking about while this conversation was happening. So solidarity, safety, and I look at those 2 together, and agency, as well as compassion, right? The way that you were talking about it. And I think, in response to what Nandini was saying, so I disclaimer work for Wikipedia. And this idea of radical openness has been so dangerous to those who do not have the luxury to be radically open. And it also exposes the vulnerable to abuse or to misuse of their data, etc. So I'm very glad that you brought that up, and I think that is something that we constantly contend with, because we're thinking about an archive of information which is a response and, to be honest, a push against this idea that everybody must give up their data. So I think for us it's also about advocacy in a way, to get people thinking about how they are data, of course, but they can leverage that in such a way that is of advantage to them rather than a corporation or the state, which is most likely going to use it against them. So coming back to your male, female, although I'm a little wary of that, the gender essentialist implications of that, I would say that for me, like, I think it's about creating spaces that are safe in whatever form that might be, and kind of asking what makes people feel safe. For some people, that might be some way of being. For some others, another way.
Yeah, and I would just like to add, based on experience, I think now that we have so many data, it's very easy for us to measure and validate gender functions. And those kinds of data, we can create programs. And at the same time, we were able to maximize value creation to everyone. And now that we know all these kinds of data and gender functions, we now anchor not on the technology, but on the humanity of technology.
I wonder if I could just ask a quick question.
Yes.
I wasn't sure how to ask this, and it's not in response to my predecessor, but my son is trans and his partner is non-binary, and they are both people of color, and they're 20, and they reject feminism in basically full force. And I don't mean this as a sort of hostile statement, but I really wonder how you've been thinking about generational differences. I mean, they reject the gender binary, so they see feminism as promoting, female-identified practices that respond to patriarchy, but they reject that that's the world that we're in. And so you can't get them to listen to anything about feminism. I understand feminism's for everyone. I came up in a different time. So how are we reaching younger people who really have a very different kind of sense of gender identity? They see it as very fluid, and they won't listen to feminism, at least in my household, because they think it's actually reinforcing the legacy of patriarchy, which they want to work on a different problem.
I think that's a really great question. And I think we do have to think about categories differently, perhaps, or think beyond categories when we and develop a new politics that goes beyond categories, perhaps. So I don't know if we have time to answer that question here, but certainly something that we can discuss offline. Very quickly.
I don't know. It's just a really important question. I don't think, feminism has gone through many contractions and expansions since it's first started, obviously, with the suffragettes. First, it was really cool and radical, and then it was not so cool, and then it was all about bra burning, and then it wasn't, and then it was kind of buried for a while, and then it came back. Let's just call it something different. I mean, we don't have to hold on to these words because they contain historical baggage that means that other people can't identify with the good stuff in them. And I think that feminism has been tainted quite significantly by the trans exclusionary radical feminism and kind of the gender essentialism, all of that stuff. So let's just work with them to call it something different and say, well, here's some useful strands, and then here's the stuff that we can just throw away.
I don't even know that we have to call it something different. It's just human rights. I mean, that's what it is at the end of the day. So, yeah. Anyway, on that note.
Yes, thank you very much to all of you, and thanks to the audience. Now I hand it back to Guru.